Hi, I'm Andrew Rodriguez, and welcome to PsychoBible, babbling about psychology and theology. Now, this is the end of year review that I wanted to do last week, and didn't get around to it because I did another video instead. And now we've already had a crazy first week of 2021. But before we get too deep into 2021, I still want to do this video. And that is the best of 2020. See, 2020, yes, it was a rough year. Everyone's talking about it like it was the worst year ever. And yeah, there's some crazy stuff that happened, and there's a lot of discouraging things and some infuriating things. But there are some things that I'm genuinely grateful for. So in the midst of all our COVID and election drama, I thought I would put out some positivity. I can get really riled up about all the civil unrest and politics from 2020 and now 2021. But when I remind myself that God is working out his plan and we're getting closer to Christ's return and things are falling in place, then I just step back, I observe things, and I think, what a time to be alive. So it's really pretty exciting. There's some things that could be kind of scary if I didn't have that foundation, that security. But with that foundation, you know what? If I live, there's more time for me to complete the mission I have from God. If I die, then I'm united with Christ. So bring it on. This is exciting. God will carry me through. I trust that God will give me the ability to complete the mission he gave me. So I fear not for my health or safety as much as just being in his will. So, just want to say that right off the bat. So here are 12 things that I'm particularly grateful for in 2020. Starting at number 12, no more of this crap. Yeah, this drag queen story hour that was going around, it started a few years ago, but really was turning into a nationwide trend throughout 2019. The pandemic killed this trend real fast. And I am grateful for that. No more of these preschoolers and kindergartners and first graders being groomed and indoctrinated with this gender ideology and transgender ideology and LGBT indoctrination at such a young age, confusing them about what it means to be a boy or a girl. Yes, there's still a lot of the confusion going around 2020, sure. But these individuals going to public libraries and schools and doing a story time with kids dressed in drag and oftentimes doing some sort of dance that is provocative looking, no more of that stuff. So thank God for that. And in fact, now parents are even more aware of what their kids are being taught in school. With now virtual learning and kids having to be stuck at home, the jig was up. Like, parents were now becoming aware and awakened, thank God, finally, to some of the so-called sex ed going on in different schools. Some states have this compulsory, comprehensive sex ed that goes from kindergarten on up, that teaches kids things like how to masturbate, how to use a condom at very young ages, and teach them things that their gender is completely unrelated to their sex, and that it can left kids confused, and it can cause a lot of distress for these kids who are just learning how to tell truth, how to tell reality, how to make sense of the world, and how to tell, a person with certain traits, that's a boy, right? And they learn to trust what they're seeing. But then they're being told, no, you can't assume the gender of someone. It's insane. So we've seen a major disruption at a grassroots level to oppose the gender ideology. Uh, Parents are having to take note and stand up and fight for their rights and fight for the rights of children to have some sanity being taught to them. And then we're seeing other aspects of this movement through all the drama that J.K. Rowling went through, and then Abigail Schreier's book, Irreversible Damage, the opposition from Target selling it, that gave it more notoriety. And so there is now more awareness of how the LGBT movement is targeting children. And the sexual revolutionaries are targeting children and grooming them to become either sexually active or, but of course, sterile, or to become gender non-conforming or trans in some way, and essentially rob them of their ability to become truly sexual, grow up to be confident in their maleness if they're boys or femaleness if they're girls, and then enter into healthy marriages and sexual lifestyles. So there's a concerted effort by these radicals to indoctrinate them early on and give them a distorted view of what sex is and what gender is. And people are catching on. So I am very grateful about that, and seeing the end, even if it's just going to be temporary, thanks to COVID, to this drag queen story hour stuff. Picking off that brings us to number 11 with the Save the Children campaign, as well as the whole pedogate stuff. Now, before you write me off as some conspiracy theorist, you have to understand there's a continuum of applications or like ways that this manifests itself over the past year. For one, the Trump administration and the U.S. Marshals, they ramped up their efforts to fight child trafficking, and which of course is mostly sex trafficking, and they busted a ton of rings. One of them was just not far from where I live. So we saw a lot of traffickers being arrested, caught, children being saved, being relocated, reunited with families, a lot of children being rescued. This was amazing this past year. Did not get talked about nearly enough. It got drowned out by a lot of other scandals and craziness going on in 2020, but this was big. Then you had the whole thing of Wayfair, which is, there's a lot of evidence there that there's something nefarious going on. And then you go into, say, QAnon and the pedogate stuff. And so before all the QAnon stuff got banned from the different social media sites, I took a little dive down that rabbit hole because I had been hearing about them for a while and dipping in and out. But I figured let me dive deeper into what they believe and watch a lot of their documentaries. And hey, I don't buy it all. Right? They believe some weird stuff, like JFK Jr. being alive this whole time and feeding intel to Trump and using him to help get revenge on the globalist who helped kill his dad, and time travel. Like, there's some weird stuff that they believe, okay? And there's some people that think, okay, the QAnon thing is probably all a big psyop to try to drum up and maintain support and enthusiasm among Trump's base. Okay, maybe. But there might have been some truth in it. If you really look at things like the Pizzagates and a lot of the things that just a little too fishy going on in Hollywood and other types of elites, it woke people up to some nefarious stuff going on, especially in Hollywood. And with the lockdown from COVID, shutting down theaters and movie productions, and it gave us the space, or at least the space that I needed, to ease that cognitive dissonance when I read through the Epstein flight log to his pedophile island. So some truths are really hard, but I'd rather live in the light than in ignorance. And so that's why I would say this is one of the best things that happened in 2020, and that was revealing the truth. Not totally. There's probably a lot more going on that we're not aware of, and maybe there's some disinformation in there. But we did rescue a lot of children, and people are much more skeptical about what's going on in Hollywood, and it should be that way. Number 10, moving on with things that are being revealed and people are being awakened to, and that is critical theory being exposed. It started for me with really Jordan Peterson, and then jumping into the intellectual dark web in 2016, 2017, and then really studying more about what's the philosophy of these social justice warriors, this whole woke movement, and you realize how it's rooted in socialism and Marxism and ultimately communism and the ideas of critical theory. So we've had more books by critics of critical theory being produced in 2020. I just finished reading Cynical Theories by James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose. There's others that came out this year. There's tons of videos on it exposing the doctrine behind a lot of the movements that we saw this past year, like Black Lives Matter. We saw how the organizers are trained Marxists, and the agenda behind the movement is really to overthrow the basic institutions of our society and put things in such an upheaval so that they can then usher in their manifesto, their Marxist agenda. So it revealed a lot. It's like in Scooby-Doo, take the mask off the villain and show who's really behind it. And we know now that's what's going on. And this is stuff that we've been talking about on YouTube and in the, like I said, the intellectual dark web. All the people that are thinkers who are more free thinkers, kind of homeless or expatriated liberals who have been sort of bewildered by the left turning way more extreme and radical, and they're like feeling abandoned by that. So if you've been following the intellectual dark web over the past few years, this is nothing new to you. But with all the riots we had this year, it really helped expose it to the general public. So now more people are becoming aware of it. And to the point where Trump, one of the good things he did was say, no more of this funding of using government, federal funds for critical race theory, because it's ultimately racist. It teaches us that people are guilty just by virtue of their skin color. And so that got misconstrued, of course, in the debate, but that was one of the best decisions he made, because people have been studying this for a while, have been saying this is a dangerous philosophy and it is bringing more division and strife. And we saw that in full force in 2020. So even though the riots, the unrest this past year was not a good thing, the exposure that the philosophy got, the philosophy that's underlying this movement, that exposure was necessary. So it's another tough truth, but I'd rather be in the light than in the darkness. Number 9, homeschooling. So whether you like it or not, parents got a taste of homeschooling. Now, I grew up as a homeschooler. I'm the middle of 3 boys, and we were each homeschooled. I was the only one, though, that was homeschooled all 12 years. So I will say, from experience, homeschooling is not for everyone. Each of my brothers had difficulties with that at different points, or my mom had difficulty with them at different points, and had to put them in public school, and it wasn't always a good decision for them to do that, because public school had their own challenges when they went from being homeschooled to then thrown into public school. But it just goes to show not everyone is fit for homeschooling. And so people got a taste for it. But some people realized, you know what? I think I prefer homeschooling. Now, not everyone was doing actual homeschooling. They might have just been doing public school at home. But the idea of my child's home, and I'm now involved in their education more. And I'm becoming aware of what they're being taught. And these teachers were shaking their boots because they realized, oh no, these parents are going to see us teaching them about LGBT indoctrination, and critical theory indoctrination. And some of these parents don't like it. Well, we don't want these parents around. So now people are starting to realize, whoa, 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 I'm in charge of my kids, not you. So people got a taste for homeschooling, and they're going to start trying to make it more a reality in their lives now, even after COVID eases up. And so that, I think, is a plus, because I grew up as a homeschooler constantly hearing criticism of homeschooling, usually based off complete ignorance. If you want to make fun of homeschoolers, make fun of us for maybe being a bit socially inept or not as up on current fads and trends. And guess what? Most of us develop enough of a thick skin that we just don't really care about peer pressure, that you can make fun of us for that and we won't really be bothered that much. But the myth out here, or the joke being used against homeschoolers that I grew up hearing from, say, the media or people who just don't know anything about homeschooling, is that homeschoolers are dumb. And that's the thing that always infuriated me, because on average, homeschoolers test much higher than the average public schooler. You're getting the individual attention you need. But, like I said, it's not a good match for everyone. So, at least now people got a taste for it. And so, they won't be talking about homeschooling from a place of ignorance as much as they used to be. So, knowledge is always a good thing to me. And number 8, speaking of home, working from home. So, I work for like 4 different clinical practices, and I also see some of my own clients on the side online. So, my schedule is like a checkerboard grid. It's like, okay, Mondays I see clients at this practice from this time till this time, and then I have to travel from the university where I counsel to this other practice half an hour away, and then I see clients from over there from like 2 o'clock to 8 p.m., and that's just Monday. And then Tuesday I'm over at one practice at a half hour away, then from there I go to the university, and then from there I go to the other practice, and I'll be all over the place, and driving all over place from some just a half hour away to another place that's over an hour away once a week. And like Wednesdays are my crazy day. So with the lockdown, one of my practices has yet to open up, so I'm seeing all those clients remotely, and the other practices have become much more flexible and open to the idea of doing remote sessions. And so I did that for a period of time, and that gave me more of the flexibility I needed. Now, most of the clients wanted to do in person as soon as they could, and I appreciate that, because I like to see people face to face. Technology is not too reliable. You can't do everything through a computer. In person is always the best. But working from home, that did help me save a ton on gas, and it gave me a lot of flexibility in my schedule, so I could put people in different slots that I wouldn't have been able to do before, because I was stuck at one place and I couldn't see a client from another practice in between clients at one place. So, worked for me. Number 7, seeing people start to appreciate things they were taking for granted, like different blessings, like their freedoms. There was one time this summer, it was Saturday night, it was still light out, so I went on a jog into my town where I live, and a lot of the restaurants were still just doing outdoor dining, and it was just a beautiful night, and you saw people all over enjoying the night. They're walking the sidewalk, they're sitting down at these outdoor restaurants eating. I think there was a car show going on that night, and you just saw people. They weren't wearing masks outside. They weren't tightly in crowds. They're social distance, I guess, whatever. But they were being normal. They were being human again. We lost a lot this past year, and I hope we won't fall back into taking things for granted, like our first responders, like paramedics and firemen and police officers, like small businesses. A lot of them got attacked, whether through riots or through lockdowns, and a lot of the businesses and restaurants I enjoyed are now shut down, some permanently. Service people, I hope people are friendlier and more patient with their waiters and waitresses, with customer service reps, with and then we just treat people like fellow humans. With the masks on, we can all seem like a bunch of automatons. But I love it now when I see people's faces. It's giving me a greater appreciation for the beauty of each person. There's a beauty in humankind. And so I can't wait for the mask to come off and for me to see real people and to see your beautiful face. That's a reflection of our Creator. So, and I'll also notice this, at a certain point, we just got sick of socializing online, and people craved human connection. And no government lockdown was going to deprive us of that right, that ability to meet people and hang out. So I'm glad to see people just enjoying and cherishing what we used to take for granted, normal human connection. It's so important. Number 6, getting a little bit more personal about my own life. There's been some really awesome opportunities this year for me, or this past year, and one of them is back in March, I was accepted as an advisory board member for Voice of the Voiceless. Now, I'm probably going to do a separate video on them at some point, but they're an advocacy group that I've been following for years, and they advocate for the rights of people with unwanted same-sex attraction or gender confusion, gender nonconformity, to live the way that is in accordance with their own values and convictions, primarily based on their faith as Christians, but just in general, and also for family members and clinical practitioners to be able to counsel people according to their desires, their goals, their values. So Voice of the Voiceless is a voice for the ex-LGBT population, a population that is constantly under attack, especially this past year and going forward. They're constantly on the run. They're being censored all over the place. So I became friends with the current president of Voice of the Voiceless. I'm friends as well with the former president and founder. And so I was inducted into their board of advisors, and we're doing some work, just getting the advocating for rights of clients. It's just good to be part of the community there. Number 5, moving along the trend of sexuality issues, I got to audit a course by Dr. Robert Gagnon, who's the pretty much expert or scholar on what the scriptures say about our sexuality. And so I got to audit his course on the Bible and homosexuality at Houston Baptist University. Thanks to COVID, things are available online now like they never were before. So I got to do that online, and that was an amazing experience. I'm still catching up. They recorded the videos, so I'm still watching the ones I missed. But it was an amazing experience, and got to connect with other people who took the course. Just really gives a thorough and solid understanding of what the scriptures really teach about sexuality, about not just homosexuality. It gets into quite a bit. It gives a very thorough understanding of what God's design and intent for our sexuality is. Number 4, speaking of sexuality and gender and understanding of God's design and intent for our sexuality, I got to do some things with the Theology of the Body Institute that were just amazing. First, I think it was late April or early May, they did the Theology of the Body virtual conference. It was a free conference over the course of 2-3 days, a certain weekend, and it was just like 80 different participants with short videos, 20 to 30, 40 minutes long each, just sharing how theology of the body applies to all sorts of areas of life, where we're talking about vocation, work, marriage, sex, homosexuality, suffering, sickness, just so many areas of life And how does understanding God's the sacramentality of our gender and our sexuality, and how God designed those things to be a reflection of who He is and a sign of our destiny as the bride of Christ. How does it apply to all these other areas of life? It's amazing how applicable it is and how much insight you can gain into so many areas of life once you have a theology of the body lens. So that was the conference. And then for the first time ever, the Theology of the Body Institute offered their Head and Heart Immersion course, the level 1 training on theology of the body, online. Now normally they do this at Black Rock Retreat, right in Quarryville, PA, where I grew up. In Black Rock I went to every summer as a kid. So they usually do their trainings, their immersion courses for a whole week at Black Rock. And I'm just like, well, there's no way I can afford to do that. I'm still self-employed, and for the longest time I was only employed part-time at my other job while I was counseling part-time, so I didn't have vacation days. I can't just take a week off, and not to mention pay for it, and get paid I don't have vacation days. I don't get paid vacation. But since it was online, I could still see clients and do the course. And this is one of the blessings of this year. You'd think with the lockdown, I would have been out of a job, but God provided. And business actually grew in the midst of the lockdown. So I had enough money that I was able to do the immersion course. And it was just an amazing experience. So I made several videos this year applying theology of the body lens to various issues, mostly cultural issues. And that was inspired by the course I took. And it's just broadened my understanding, and I've made more connections with other people who are learning about theology of the body, and now I'm part of a group on Facebook. If you want to join it, check with me and I'll help you join it. That is trying to spread theology of the body to Protestants, because so many people think it's just a Catholic teaching, or they don't even know anything about it. But it's really a teaching for the entire church. So if you're a Protestant and you want to know more about theology of the body, let me know, and you can join our theology of the body group. And we're studying through Christopher West's book, Our Bodies Tell God's Story, which is the book that he wrote to present John Paul II's theology of the body teaching to a Protestant evangelical audience. Number 3, 2020 was a year of me leveling up as a therapist. And that started with doing my training with the Reintegrative Therapy Association. Now, reintegrative therapy is a very comprehensive therapeutic approach for trauma and addictions. And it's most often applied for people dealing with conflicts over their sexuality, whether it's unwanted same-sex attraction or sexual addiction. But also, we're finding it's just a practical approach to use on all sorts of issues, such as binge eating. They're doing currently a study to show how this therapeutic protocol can work with binge eating disorders. And so it was founded by Joe Nicolosi Jr. as the most recent iteration of his father's work, which used to be called reparative therapy. But Joe Nicolosi Jr. added so many different components to his father's work that it really became its own thing, hence reintegrative therapy. So this past year I joined a consult group with Joe Nicolosi Jr. and I am learning a ton from this. It's leveling me up as a therapist so much. And that brings me to the next thing on my list of leveling up, and that is I finally got to do my training in EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. I first learned about EMDR when I was in college back in 2005, and I knew that was an approach to working with people with trauma that I wanted to learn, and I just never had the money until this year because things were going well enough. I was able to afford and was also blessed with a healthy donation from someone to do an online training for it. Another blessing of COVID, or at least the lockdowns, was all these trainings were now available online. So I did it with Ricky Greenwald's Child Trauma and Trauma Institute, and they did a stellar job. And it was very thorough. Most trainings are just one weekend. This was like 8 full days stretched from September through December. So all day Saturday and Sunday, uh, four different weekends, and then all day Saturday, one weekend in once in November and once in December. So very thorough. It included the most recent development in EMDR, the flash technique, which you can check out some videos on that, and it's a very helpful technique. I found it helpful with some of my clients who tend to dissociate. So since they can't do the prolonged reprocessing work because they'll tend to zone out, they do something like flash. They can focus more easily. So, and the training was just sort of what I needed to help give me a whole refresher on just counseling in general, and give me a lot of the tools that I was really honestly lacking from my grad school experience, like making a really concise and effective treatment plan and case formulation. Just they did an excellent, very thorough job. So if you are looking for an EMDR training, I highly recommend them. Okay, number one, the best of 2020 was I got to spend more time with my wife. Like, and I wish I could say that's how it was from the beginning of the lockdown. But when the lockdowns began, my wife's job gave her the option of working from home, and they pretty much sent everyone else home as well. So barely anyone was at the office. And so she thought, well, since hardly anyone's at the office, I'll just work at the office. I could probably concentrate better there. They have better internet. My desk is all set up there. And so it wasn't until September that my wife was like, you know what? I want to work from home. Let me give it a shot. And I loved it because I was going kind of crazy. I'm stuck at home by myself with all these clients. By the end of the week, I was losing my freaking mind. But having my wife at home, being able to see her in the morning instead of her stuck in the bathroom getting ready for work, and then we're like ships in the night, and I work long hours. But being able to have lunch together every day, to maybe pop into the office and give her a hug, it's just, I'm going to miss it when she goes back to the office. I love my wife. And it really helped out. It helped ease her as well. She was really stressed with the COVID stuff. The lockdown, the way things were going in society was stressing her a bit. So I think it helped just having her around. And she grew in some hobbies during this lockdown. She really started stretching her cooking and baking skills. So she was posting all her pictures online, and oh my gosh, I ate good this year. She was doing a lot of cooking and baking. My wife is not much of a baker before this year, but she learned that she can bake. And I grew up with a mom who was a really good baker, so I was loving it. A little too much. So now 2021 is the year of me getting back in shape. Alright, well, thank you so much for watching. Yes, 2020 was rough. I don't want to discount or minimize the hardships that so many people went through with losing loved ones, losing businesses, their careers, the election turmoil, the civil unrest all over the country. I get that. But I wonder, what are the things that might have been the silver lining for you? Were there any blessings that you experienced over this past year? If so, if you can think of anything, share it in the comments below. What's something you're genuinely grateful for? Please, no sarcasm. Like, be real with me. What is something that was actually a blessing this past year? And drop that in the comments. And I'm grateful for all the subscribers I got this year. I started off 2020 with less than 100, and I reached 100 like around February, and then 200, end of the year with like over 250 subscribers before the year was over, and uh, that's great. I'm glad the message is getting out, and people are watching, subscribing, commenting, sharing. So please keep it up. I don't know with the censorship how much longer my channel will be around on YouTube, but I will keep making videos as long as there's a platform I can go on. So if you want to join my email list in case anything does happen to my channel, please email me, and I'll make sure to keep in touch with you once I have to make any more jumps. Okay. Thank you so much. Join me in the comments. Let me know what was your best of 2020. God bless.